A heavy manila envelope landed on Hazel Mitchell's desk with a thud, breaking her concentration on the gala designs scattered across her work surface. "What is this?" Hazel asked, looking up at Diane, her assistant. "Special delivery from Blackwood Tower," the girl replied. The messenger said it was urgent and confidential. Hazel's stomach clenched. Blackwood Industries was her biggest and most difficult client. As a leading event planner in Portland, she'd handled everything from tech conferences to celebrity weddings, but nothing compared to Ethan Blackwood's exacting standards. "Great," Hazel muttered. Probably another last-minute change at the charity gala. She slit the envelope open, expecting to see revised seating charts or menu changes. Instead, a legal document fell out, its title etched in black letters, Agreement on Surrogacy and Joint Parenting. Hazel blinked, sure she was wrong. "What?" she whispered, flipping through the pages. Terms, conditions, financial arrangements, guardianship schedules, educational arrangements, all spelled out in meticulous detail. The last page had a blank line for her signature, next to Ethan Blackwood's crisp, angular handwriting. "Everything okay?" Diana asked, appearing next to him. "I need to make a call," Hazel barely managed to say, already dialing Blackwood's office with trembling fingers. 20 minutes later, Hazel bursts into the glittering lobby of Blackwood Tower, ignoring the receptionist who recognized her from her many event planning meetings. "Miss Mitchell, you can't just..." the woman tried to say. "Look," Hazel replied, pressing the button for the elevator to the top floor. The elevator doors opened into Ethan Blackwood's penthouse, a minimalist office with floor-to-ceiling windows and stunning views of Portland and Mount Hood in the distance. Ethan stood by the window, his back turned, his phone pressed to his ear. At 35, Ethan Blackwood had been named the most eligible bachelor 3 times in a row by Fortune. And despite his striking appearance, his cold personality did not match her ideals. Tall, with broad shoulders, dark hair neatly trimmed, a suit without a single wrinkle. He radiated power and control. "I don't care about the competition," he said, his voice cool and confident. "Double down. I want those patents." He turned, spotting Hazel, and ended the conversation without even saying goodbye. "Miss Mitchell, I see you've received my offer." Hazel slammed the document down on his immaculate desk. "That's not a proposal, Mr. Blackwood. That's madness." One corner of his dark eyebrows lifted slightly, the only thing that could be called emotion on his face. "I assure you, I am of perfect sound mind." "Then explain to me why you sent me a contract that says I have to give birth to your child." Ethan pointed to one of the stylish chairs opposite his desk. "Please have a seat. I'll stand." "Thank you," she replied reservedly. Ethan sighed and sat down in his chair. "My grandmother is dying." His words caught Hazel off guard. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Beatrice Blackwood built this company from scratch. She is the reason I have everything I have." For a moment, her gaze caught something almost human in his cold eyes. "Her final request is to know that the Blackwood legacy will continue. Not just the company, but the family. But you can't find a woman to just meet like a normal person?" Hazel said sarcastically. "Dating is ineffective," he replied with absolute seriousness. "Unpredictable. I've known you for 3 years. You're smart, healthy, capable." "Oh, come on," Hazel snorted sheepishly. "I couldn't take care of things like that without your advice. And you mentioned at the Hendersons' wedding that you'd always wanted children." Hazel's jaw dropped. "You were listening to my conversation with my fiancé. I was standing right there. It was a private moment between friends." "The contract offers $5 million, Ethan continued, not giving up. "Full parenting rights, best medical care, education. I'm not going to have your baby for money." Hazel exclaimed so loudly that his assistant must have heard her words through the door. "So what do you want?" The question stunned her. "What? If not money, what would make this agreement acceptable to you?" Hazel stared at him, not believing her eyes. "Nothing. This is not a negotiation. You can't just create a family to order. In fact, with modern reproductive technologies." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Hazel interrupted. At that moment, the elevator door opened and a small, elegant woman with silver hair and a cane walked into the office. Despite her fragile appearance, she moved with undeniable authority. I thought I heard screams, she said, her gaze piercing as she looked at both of them. You must be the famous Hazel Mitchell. Ethan said a lot of good things about you, she added, turning to Hazel. Hazel recognized Beatrice Blackwood from her many charity events, though the social matriarch looked considerably more withered than she had at the Christmas ball. Beatrice, Hazel replied, trying to regain her composure. Oh my God, your miss and her grandson are probably not just arguing about my great-grandson? Beatrice chuckled. Don't be surprised, my dear. Who do you think suggested you for this role? Ethan cleared his throat. Grandma, maybe we shouldn't. Oh, shut up, Ethan. You're ruining everything, she told him. As expected, Beatrice sat in the chair, exuding authority. Miss Mitchell, my grandson has the intelligence of a thermostat, finely tuned, but completely soulless. But, she waved her hand, as if trying to justify him. He has potential. With all due respect, Miss Blackwood, Hazel said carefully, your grandson just asked me to deliver his child under contract. That is not a normal request. Blackwoods have never been normal, my dear. But we are loyal, stubborn, and we love truly when we know how. Beatrice looked at her with a piercing gaze. I'm not asking you to marry him. God forbid, he's not ready yet. I'm asking you to think about giving an old woman some peace, maybe teaching my grandson about life through the baby. Nothing changes a person like parenthood, Beatrice said with confidence. Ethan's dad was exactly the same. All business and no soul. Until one day, a nurse placed Ethan in his arms. That changed everything. Hazel looked at the two Blackwoods, the imperious old woman and the cold young man, and felt like she was in a strange fairy tale where the evil queen was not evil at all, and the ice prince was subject to melting. This is madness, she muttered, more to herself than to them. Think about it tonight, Beatrice suggested, getting up with an effort. Ethan will invite you to dinner tomorrow to discuss changes to the contract. I didn't agree to anything. At 7 o'clock, Ethan said, as if everything had already been decided. I'll send a car. I can go myself, Hazel replied, getting ready. And to be clear, just because I come to dinner doesn't mean I agree to it. As the elevator doors closed, leaving Ethan with his stony face and Beatrice with her knowing smile, Hazel leaned against the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. Only one question tormented her. What next? This couldn't be happening. But the contract in her bag was all too real, as was that sneaky voice in her head that whispered, What if? What if this was her chance to become a mother without the long wait? What if there was more to Ethan Blackwood than spreadsheets and cold efficiency? What if? She snapped at her reflection in the polished elevator doors. No, absolutely not. But as soon as she stepped into the lobby, her phone reminded her, a calendar invite, dinner, contract review, edits. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. And despite everything, Hazel couldn't help but smile at the audacity of the situation. She picked up her phone and changed the entry. Dinner, reality review with E. Blackwood. And she didn't know that reality was about to become far more complicated than either of them could have imagined. The hostess at Leon led Hazel through the cozy restaurant to a corner where Ethan Blackwood was already sitting, studying documents on his tablet. Typical. Even during dinner, the man worked. You're 4 minutes late, he said, not looking up from his screen. Hi, Ethan, Hazel replied, sitting down at the table. Traffic downtown is terrible. You should use real-time navigation. Hazel bit back the retort, picking up the menu. Next time I'm called upon to discuss surrogacy over appetizers, I'll think about this. Ethan finally put the tablet down, his steely blue eyes meeting hers. I sense that you're still upset about the proposal. Upset? No, I'm far from upset. I've been through shock, outrage, and bewilderment, and now I'm somewhere between laughing and concerned for your mental health. The waiter came over with 2 glasses of wine, placing a deep burgundy in front of Ethan and a white in front of Hazel. I didn't order this, she said. Sanser, you mentioned this was your favorite wine at Martin Chen's wedding, Ethan said matter-of-factly. When you were discussing wine regions with the bride's father. Hazel narrowed her eyes. Do you have some kind of file on me? I have an excellent memory. That doesn't make it any less creepy. Something flickered across his face, perhaps embarrassment, but it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. I pay attention to details. It's part of my success. Well, here's one thing, she said, raising her glass. Women don't usually like it when surrogacy contracts are shoved at them at the most unexpected moment. Ethan frowned slightly. It wasn't out of nowhere. We've been working together for 3 years. You're organized, smart, and responsible. Your event planning business is successful, but could benefit from some additional capital. You've talked about wanting to be a mother, and you mentioned to Kayla Henderson that dating in Portland is, quote, nightmare of bearded men who can't take responsibility. Hazel nearly choked on her wine. Oh my God, you were actually eavesdropping. I was just talking to the bride's uncle, who happened to be next to you. And what time is it? About 17 minutes. Hazel couldn't help but laugh. The absurdity of the situation, combined with his completely serious expression, destroyed all her anger. Ethan, normal people don't remember conversations word for word that took place months ago. I'm not normal, he replied simply. This, she said, raising her glass, is the first thing we agreed on. After they ordered, Ethan of course knew her favorite dish. Hazel decided to broach the main topic. I will not sign your contract. Ethan nodded, unsurprised. My grandmother suggested you might have counteroffers. This is not a negotiation. I will not carry your child. Then why did you come to dinner? Was a fair question. Hazel turned the napkin over in her hands. Curiosity, perhaps. Or perhaps I wanted to understand what kind of person would consider creating a new person to be akin to a merger. The principles aren't all that different. They both require careful planning, resource allocation, and… Hazel cut him off, unable to contain herself. That's why it's a terrible idea. A baby isn't a business venture, Ethan. It's chaos, unpredictability, and emotion. I know what children are like, he answered calmly, but there was a note of tension in his voice. Are you sure? Because from where I'm sitting, you seem to be afraid of anything that even slightly resembles human feelings. His jaw tightened slightly. His face remained impassive, but his eyes, they were full of something deep hidden. My emotional side doesn't matter. His voice was cold and emotionless. I'll provide financially and give the child every advantage. Children need more than just advantages, she interrupted. They need warmth, spontaneity, laughter. My grandmother raised me after my parents died, Ethan said quietly, but his words fell like a heavy stone into the silence. She was strict, demanding, focused solely on preparing me to run Blackwood Industries. I did well. Her heart sank at his quiet admission. Like a cruelly thrown stone, the phrase pierced her. For the first time that evening, she felt that beneath his cold exterior there was something alive, a boy hardened by loss and expectation. When their food finally arrived, the conversation paused. Hazel took a moment to take in the man. Yes, he was robotic, completely out of touch with the situation, but what if there was something more behind that wall? Tell me about your grandmother, she said, changing tactics. Ethan didn't show that he was surprised. Beatrice Blackwood built an empire from scratch. When her husband died, leaving her with a small electronics repair shop and a 2-year-old son, my father, everyone expected her to sell the business. But she didn't. She expanded it, identified promising technologies, and began making strategic acquisitions. That sounds impressive, Hazel said, feeling the tension in the air increase. She is, Ethan said, and for the first time there was real emotion in his voice. The doctors told her 3 months, maybe less. Hazel felt pain penetrate her chest. I'm so sorry, Ethan. Really. Her last request is to know that the Blackwood legacy will continue. Not just the company, but the family. She looked at him, his eyes hard as steel. And you can't find, well, someone you could start a relationship with? His look was so genuinely puzzled that Hazel almost laughed. Relationships are inefficient and unpredictable. The probability of finding a compatible partner in the required time is too low. So you're saying that your grandmother should die without knowing that you even tried to find someone? Hazel couldn't help but let the edge out of her voice. He was silent, considering her words. Then he added quietly, she was more than a grandmother to me. She was everything. Her breath caught. There was such genuine pain in that simple, unadorned confession that Hazel felt her own heart squeeze. Ethan might be cold, but there was more beneath that mask. What if? She began slowly, as if trying to organize her own thoughts. We try a different approach. He leaned forward, his eyes playing with curiosity. I'm listening. Your grandmother wants to see you start a family before time runs out. What if we give her that, but without a real baby? Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Explain. We'll pretend. We'll say we're dating, falling in love, that you proposed, give her the joy of seeing you with someone, building a future. Silence fell over them. There was something in that sentence that could be either salvation or the beginning of something dangerous. He was weighing her words, weighing the possible consequences. And she could feel the tension in the air growing. Everything in her body screamed that this was a risk. But it was a risk that could decide everything. What happens if they take the risk? This solves the problem without creating, so to speak, a real person within the business service, Ethan thought, his analytical mind clearly processing the proposed idea. Deception? More like a compassionate illusion, Hazel countered. People often do that for elderly relatives. And what do you get out of this agreement? Of course, he immediately began to assess her motivation. First of all, I won't have to bear your child, Hazel replied guardedly. But I'd also like you to fund a community center in the Riverside area. Now both his eyebrows rose. An unusual request. I grew up there, Hazel explained. They've needed a proper community center for years. A place for graduate programs, vocational courses, classes for seniors. The city is constantly cutting its budget, and that's important to me. Yes, it matters to you, Ethan nodded, as if registering the information. How much? 2 million. Made. The answer came so quickly that Hazel felt a little shocked. Just like that, without further ado. That's even less than what I offered for the surrogacy. Hazel couldn't help but laugh. I guess that's true. We'll need to set parameters, Ethan continued, already switching into planning mode. Duration, expected behavior, public appearances, boundaries. Of course you'll want a contract for a fictitious relationship, she said. The purity of agreements eliminates misunderstandings. Hazel chuckled despite herself. Okay, write down your parameters, but I reserve the right to final approval. Agreed. Ethan extended his hand across the table. Got a deal, Ms. Mitchell? Looking at his outstretched hand, Hazel felt like she was making either the best or worst decision of her life. But it seemed like there was no turning back. Deal, she said, shaking his hand. But please, if we're going to pretend to date, I guess you can call me Hazel. Their hands remained linked a little longer than necessary, and for a moment Hazel thought she saw the faintest real smile on Ethan Blackwood's face. Hazel, he repeated, her name sounding oddly right in his precise voice. I think this arrangement might work after all. Little did any of them know how profoundly and confusingly their simple agreement would change. No, no, no. Beatrice Blackwood rapped her cane sharply on the polished penthouse floor. Oh, God, Ethan. She's supposed to be your girlfriend, not your tax consultant. Hazel barely contained her laughter as she watched Ethan frown, clearly confused. We are holding hands as instructed, he recalled. As if you were afraid she'd run away, Beatrice replied. Relax. Look at her as if she were on the moon, not as if she were the person who made a mistake in her expense report. It was day 3 of what Hazel internally called Operation Convince Beatrice, and things weren't going as smoothly as Ethan's 8-page relationship document had suggested. Should I show you? Beatrice suggested. She turned to Hazel with a sly smile. Gerald, my second husband, not Ethan's grandfather, by the way, was a real romantic. Come here, my dear, and I'll show you. Hazel walked up to the elegant woman, trying not to look at Ethan, who was looking increasingly awkward. Now, Beatrice began, taking Hazel's hand in hers with her slender one. Romance can't be clinical. It's connection. The way your eyes linger, she gave you a look of sparkling sincerity, so that you feel her capturing your attention. The little touches that seem spontaneous but aren't. Her fingers lightly touched Hazel's hand, and the main thing was the way you moved closer, as if creating an invisible wall that said, "We are together." Beatrice demonstrated this by leaning slightly towards Hazel, creating exactly the effect she was talking about. For a woman in her 80s, she was surprisingly good at flirting. Grandma, Ethan interrupted, his voice low. I don't think that's necessary. That's because you've never tried to seduce anyone in your life, Beatrice replied. Money and your face did all the work for you. Hazel couldn't help but laugh, which brought a sharp expression to Ethan's face and an approving smile to Beatrice's. "Try again," the older woman said. "And this time, Ethan, pretend you really like this poor girl." With a barely perceptible sigh, Ethan walked up to Hazel. He took her hand, deliberately loosening his grip. Hazel felt a strange uneasiness as he turned to her, his icy eyes focused solely on her face. "So," he asked, his voice softening a little. The change was subtle, but startling. His posture shifted, his shoulders relaxed, he leaned closer, and the perpetual frown between his brows disappeared, the corners of his mouth lifting into what could almost be called a smile. And the strangest thing of all, his thumb began to slowly trace circles over the back of her hand. "Better," Beatrice remarked approvingly, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Now try to give a compliment. A sincere one, not something from a work report." Ethan slowed down, and Hazel braced herself for an awkward comment about her organizational skills or punctuality. Instead, he surprised her. "Your eyes change color depending on the light," he said quietly. "They're amber now, but yesterday at sunset they were almost gold." Hazel couldn't help but look surprised. "Did you notice that?" "I notice everything about you," he replied, without looking away. For a moment, Hazel forgot that this was all a game. A warm, uneasy feeling flared in her chest until she remembered that this was all being done for Beatrice. Ethan was simply executing a plan with his usual precision. "Excellent," Beatrice exclaimed, clapping her hands and breaking the strange tension. "Perhaps there is hope for you yet, Ethan. Now let's talk about the gala on Saturday. It will be your first public appearance as a couple." As Beatrice laid out her expectations, Hazel tried to regain her balance. She had always known Ethan to be attractive, statue-like, stern, and emotionless, but she had never felt the full force of his attention. It was disturbing. "Hazel needs something appropriate for the party," Beatrice continued. "Something that will identify her as a Blackwood associate." "I have plenty of gala-appropriate dresses," Hazel countered. "I attend gala events professionally, remember? As a servant, my dear. But not as Ethan's chosen companion," Beatrice said bluntly. "No hard feelings. Your work is excellent, but appearances matter." Before Hazel could feel truly insulted, Ethan intervened. "Hazel is not a servant, Grandma. She is the owner of a successful event coordination business." The unexpected defense took both women by surprise. However, Beatrice quickly regained control. "I've arranged for a stylist to visit tomorrow. Consider it my gift." "It's not really," Hazel began. "Thank you, Grandma," Ethan interrupted. "Though I'm sure Hazel will make the final choice herself." Another unexpected moment of support. Hazel gave him a grateful look, which he noticed and nodded back. "Of course she will," Beatrice agreed generously. "Now I'm a little tired. Ethan, be my dear, see your girl out, and I'll rest a little before dinner." Once they were alone in the elevator, Hazel took a deep breath. "Your grandmother is a real force of nature." "You have no idea," Ethan replied, loosening his tie. "She obviously liked you, though." "I'm a lucky guy," Hazel said sarcastically. "Actually, yes," Ethan replied, but there was no humor in his voice. "She rarely approves of anyone." The elevator doors opened, and they found themselves in a private garage beneath the building. As she stepped toward Hazel's car, she couldn't help but ask, "What about what you said about my eyes? Was that from your surveillance files, or did you make that up for Beatrice's benefit?" Ethan slowed. "Neither. I just noticed." "Oh, I see." Hazel couldn't understand why this made her feel a little embarrassed. Well played." "I wasn't playing," he said, his voice firm, like a fact from a report. "Your eyes are extraordinary." "I always thought so." Before Hazel could process his words, he continued, "The stylist will be at your apartment tomorrow at 2 p.m. I made sure your calendar was clear." And then, like magic, he was back to his usual controlling, overbearing style. "What?" Hazel exclaimed, not hiding her surprise. "Rescheduled your meetings for later. Your assistant was very helpful." "You called Diana without my consent?" Her voice was already full of indignation. "It was effective. It was an invasion of my privacy. You can't just rearrange my life because it suits you, Ethan." He frowned slightly before answering, The contract states that the relationship will take priority. This has nothing to do with the contract, Hazel interrupted, holding back a burst of anger. This is basic respect and boundaries. You can't make decisions for me without consulting me first. This is the ABCs of relationships. Ethan was silent for a moment, processing her words. Finally, he said, I overstepped my bounds. The simple admission cooled her anger a little. Yes, you did. I apologize. I am not accustomed to considering another person's autonomy in my decision-making process. It was perhaps the most conscious thing Hazel had ever heard him say. Well, get used to it. If this fake alliance has any chance of succeeding, we need to be partners. Equal partners. Ethan nodded confidently, understood. I will coordinate all future agreements with you. Thank you. Hazel opened the car door, then froze. To be honest, I thought you did well with Grandma today. You were a better actor than I expected. A momentary emotion crossed Ethan's face, something she couldn't quite interpret. I just followed the parameters. Parameters, she repeated, getting into the car. Meet your board members for dinner tomorrow night. 7 p.m. I'll send you a car. He suddenly stopped, as if realizing something. Would you prefer that I send a car, or would you like to go yourself? This small adjustment made her smile despite everything. The car will be just right. Thank you. I see you're already starting to learn. As Hazel drove away, she caught a glimpse of Ethan in the rearview mirror, still standing where she'd left him, watching her drive away with an expression that was unreadable. For a man who claimed that emotion was ineffective, he suddenly seemed full of emotion. The stylist, Margot, was a blessing. Instead of pushing Hazel toward the flashy styles that billionaire girls typically choose, she focused on elegant pieces that complemented Hazel's taste while elevating it. You're not a trophy, Margot said, sorting through the outfits she'd brought to Hazel's apartment. You're a partner. We need to project an image of confidence, not desperation. I'm not actually his partner. Hazel felt the need to clarify, even though she had signed an NDA that prevented her from disclosing the true terms of the agreement. Margot winked at her. Darling, I've styled enough women for Ethan Blackwood over the years to know that you're an exception. He's never brought anyone to Beatrice before you. That says a lot about you. Hazel froze. He asked you to style other women for business meetings? Very specific instructions. Elegant but memorable as background accessories. Margot held up the deep emerald dress, trying it on Hazel. With him, all he said was, she should look like herself, but better, in 10 years. That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard him say. We're not. It's not like that. Hazel stumbled, not understanding why the comment made her feel embarrassed. Darling, you don't need to explain. But trust me on this. Margot's eyes lit up with a certain knowingness. You're the first woman Ethan Blackwood has ever seen as a person, not a functional part. Now put this on and let's make his eyes pop out of his perfect head. The dress was a revelation. A deep emerald silk that shifted from green to gold depending on the light, like Hazel's eyes. The cut was modern yet timeless, highlighting her collarbones and back while maintaining an elegant modesty. It's perfect, Hazel admitted, twirling in front of the mirror. Just one last touch, Margot said, pulling out a velvet box. These arrived this morning with specific instructions to pair them with whatever you choose. Inside lay a delicate necklace and earrings, emeralds surrounded by small diamonds, elegant but not flashy. I can't accept this, Hazel objected, not even daring to touch the sparkling stones. The note said it belonged to his mother, Margot replied softly. Just for the evening if you want. Hazel stared at the jewelry, feeling a strange tightness in her chest. Ethan had only mentioned his parents once, noting their deaths when he was a child. That he'd chosen to lend her his mother's jewelry for their game seemed unexpectedly significant. Her phone shook and a text from Ethan himself appeared on the screen. Are you satisfied with the styling session? Hazel smiled at his wording as she typed back. Yes, thanks for taking my style into account. 3 dots appeared and disappeared, then appeared again. The emeralds were my mother's. There is no obligation to wear them. It is your choice. The thoughtfulness of those simple words touched something in Hazel that she hadn't expected. She typed back, I'd be happy to wear them. Her reply came instantly, car will be arriving at 6:30 p.m. I look forward to seeing you. A standard pre-meeting message, perfect for their fake relationship. But for some reason, it made her heart beat a little faster. Careful, dear, Margot said, watching Hazel's expression with understanding. That smile doesn't look fake at all. I'm just getting into character, Hazel said, putting her phone down. But when she put on the emerald necklace that night, clasping it around her neck and looking at herself in the mirror, she wasn't sure where the character ended and I began. 6 weeks into their game, Hazel finds herself in the weirdest situation she's ever been in, standing in Ethan's stylish kitchen at 7 a.m., making pancakes. You don't have to do that, Ethan said, watching her whisk the batter with suspicious interest. The housekeeper could make breakfast. Mrs. Chen has Saturdays off and besides, pancakes are part of the experience. Hazel waved her whisk. Your grandmother invited us to a cozy weekend at the family lake house. Cozy means home-cooked breakfast, not delivery. Ethan looked skeptical, but still handed her the glass of milk she asked for. You take this role seriously, he noted. Method acting, Hazel replied with a wink. Now get out there and slice some strawberries. She was surprised that he agreed without objection, methodically cutting the berries into perfect, equal slices. Of course you'll be precise even with fruit, she teased. The sequence ensures optimal distribution of flavor, he replied seriously. Hazel laughed. Has anyone ever told you that you're terribly charmingly weird sometimes? No, Ethan replied, genuinely puzzled. Never. Their eyes met and a strange, warm moment passed between them, broken only by the sound of Beatrice's cane on the wooden floor. Is that pancake I smell? The older woman asked, walking into the kitchen with an energy she hadn't shown in weeks. The fresh air by the lake seems to have done her some good. Hazel insists on cooking, Ethan explained. Because she knows what makes a home, Beatrice approved, settling herself onto a bar stool. You could learn from her, Ethan. Hazel flipped the perfectly golden pancake. He's learning to cut strawberries with mathematical precision, she added with a grin. Baby steps, Beatrice laughed. But Hazel nearly dropped her shovel when she talked about children. They were expecting it. Beatrice had been remarkably patient, not forcing the conversation about great-grandchildren so early in their relationship. Grandma, Ethan warned, his voice low. What? I'm old and dying. I'm allowed to be direct, Beatrice replied without a trace of self-pity. I was just asking, were you two talking about children? Hazel and Ethan exchanged glances. According to the terms of their contract, this moment required a delicate evasion with a hint of the future. We're just focusing on getting to know each other better right now, Hazel said diplomatically, transferring the pancakes to plates. But you want children? Beatrice continued, accepting her plate with a falsely innocent smile. Someday, yes, Hazel answered honestly. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother, just not through a surrogacy contract with an emotionally frozen millionaire. And you, Ethan? Ethan slowed down, the strawberry hovering in his hand. I think children are an important part of legacy planning. Hazel kicked him under the table. Legacy planning? Could you sound a little more human, she thought. What Ethan meant, she interjected smoothly, is that we both see children in our future, but we're not in a rush. At my age, everything seems rushed, sighed Beatrice with a sense of theatricality. But I suppose I can wait a little longer. These pancakes are almost worth it. Crisis averted. They enjoyed breakfast while Beatrice told Hazel stories about Ethan's childhood at the lake house, how he built sandboxes with methodical precision, how he classified rocks by mineral composition, his one attempt at catching a fish, which ended with him creating a chart of optimal fishing conditions instead of catching anything. You make me sound like a weird kid, Ethan countered with a hint of protest. You were, Beatrice confirmed without the slightest hesitation. Brilliant and strange, and from the first moment you could speak, you were yourself. Why do you think I indulged your oddities? You reminded me of your grandfather, the same mind that sees patterns where others see chaos. There was genuine affection in her voice, and Hazel noticed how Ethan's expression softened at the mention of his grandfather, a man he clearly admired. After breakfast, Beatrice announced that she needed a nap. Age is a terribly inconvenient thing, she complained as her nurse helped her back to her apartment. Don't waste a beautiful day on me. Take the boat. Ethan knows how to steer, she added, though he'll probably spend 20 minutes calculating wind resistance before he starts the engine. When Beatrice left, Ethan turned to Hazel. You don't have to go by boat if you don't want to. Are you kidding? It's lovely outside, and I've always wanted to see the lake, Hazel replied, already clearing away the plates. Unless you don't mind. I love boating, he admitted. It's calming. An hour later, they were gliding across the clear waters of the lake, the mountains rising majestically around them. Ethan was steering the boat with unexpected confidence, his usual reserve melting away on the water. You're full of surprises, Blackwood, Hazel shouted over the roar of the engine. You really look like you're enjoying yourself. He brought the boat into a secluded bay and turned off the engine, allowing them to drift slowly in the sun. Contrary to popular belief, I am capable of enjoying myself, he said, his gaze following her face. You could have fooled me, she teased him, running her fingers through the cool water. Though you have become almost human in these last few weeks. It is your influence, no doubt. There was a dry irony in his voice that she was beginning to recognize. Subtle, but definitely there. I'll take that as a compliment. Hazel leaned back, her face turned toward the sun. This place is magical. Now I understand why you loved coming here as a child. This was the one place where I didn't have to be perfect, Ethan said quietly, surprising her with his candor. Grandma was demanding. But here, she let me just be. Hazel opened her eyes and looked at him carefully in the bright sun. His usual armor of exclusive suits had been replaced with casual clothes, although his idea of casual still included designer jeans and a perfectly pressed shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal his surprisingly muscular forearms. Is it because you brought her here? Hoping that the magic of this lake house would work again. Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant shore. The doctors say the treatment isn't working as well as they expected. She wanted to see this place one last time. The simple statement, delivered without drama, shocked Hazel. Despite all the elaborate acting they had been doing, the reality of Beatrice's condition remained inescapable. I'm sorry, Ethan, she said softly. I know how much she means to you. He was silent for a long moment. She's the only person who ever truly understood me. Even when I upset her, which was often, she never tried to change me, just make me better. The vulnerability in his voice made something in Hazel's chest tighten. Without thinking, she sat down next to him, taking his hand in hers. Tell me about her. The real Beatrice, not just the scary businesswoman everyone knows. To her surprise, he agreed. For nearly an hour, Ethan told stories about his grandmother, her sharp mind, her secret love of sweets, how she attended every one of his science competitions in heels and a full business suit because she came straight from board meetings, how she fired his first nanny for suggesting she correct his obsessive habits. She was a wonderful mother to you, Hazel said when he finally fell silent. She wasn't maternal in the traditional sense, Ethan replied. But she loved me in her own way, very much. Like anyone else I'm starting to get to know, Hazel said without thinking. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. For one breathless moment, Hazel thought he might kiss her, and surprisingly, she realized she wanted to. But instead, he cleared his throat and glanced at his watch. We should go back. Grandma will wake up soon. The moment faded, leaving Hazel confused and slightly embarrassed. This was supposed to be a sham, a business arrangement with clear boundaries. So why did her heart beat faster when he looked at her like that? And why did she feel disappointed when he pulled away? That evening, after a quiet dinner with Beatrice, Hazel returned to her room in the spacious lake house. She was removing a pin from her hair when there was a soft knock on the door. Ethan, she asked, surprised to see him standing in the doorway with an expression that was completely unfamiliar to her, uncertain. Can I talk to you? He asked formally. Of course. She stepped aside, allowing him to enter. He clicked his nails on the floor for a moment before turning to face her. There was one complication. With your grandmother? Hazel asked, immediately worried. No, with our agreement. He handed her his tablet, opening the document. Board insists on genetic testing before approving amendments to grandmother's will. Hazel began to quickly scan the document, her confusion growing. Genetic testing of what? The heir, Ethan said simply and clearly. They require proof of pregnancy within the next month with DNA confirmation that it is a descendant of the Blackwoods. Hazel nearly dropped her tablet. that they can't do that. It's an invasion of privacy, unacceptable, and probably illegal. Unfortunately, they can. The company's articles of association give the board of directors the power to examine inheritance claims where significant assets are involved. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of irritation. My cousin Vernon is behind this. He's going to take control if I don't comply. But we're not trying to have a baby, Hazel reminded him, her voice rising. That was the whole point of our fake relationship. I know, Ethan replied, his calm cracking for the first time. But Vernon somehow convinced the board that we were only entering into a relationship to fulfill Grandma's terms, with no intention of producing an heir. And that's exactly what we're doing. Yeah. But we weren't supposed to get caught. Hazel began to pace the room nervously. What are our options? We're ending this agreement. I'll tell Grandma the truth, and Vernon will take control when she's gone, Ethan said with such cold indifference that it seemed he didn't realize the implications. Your grandmother will be horrified, Hazel said quietly, remembering how Beatrice had perked up at the mere thought of them being together. What else? Ethan slowed his pace. We're continuing with the original plan with surrogacy. Have a real baby? Are you serious? Hazel shook her head, her voice full of confusion. That would solve the current problem. Ethan, we're not having a baby to trick your cousin. That's crazy, even for you. I'm just laying out all the possible solutions, he said, his voice low, as if he didn't believe what he was saying. A child is not a solution. It's a person, a lifelong commitment. Hazel sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes dull as if she was having trouble breathing. There has to be another way, she said, still not believing this was real. I've been looking at all the options, Ethan said, looking ready to give up. These are our only options, unless you have any other suggestions. Hazel looked up and saw the tension in his shoulders and the rare doubt in his eyes. Despite all his wealth and power, he looked lost in that moment. We need time to think, she said finally. We can't make a decision overnight. Ethan nodded, and though his confidence was back, it seemed more fragile now. You're right. We have about 3 weeks before the board asks for confirmation. 3 weeks to decide whether to have a child together or admit that we lied to your dying grandmother. Hazel laughed, a little nervously. When you said complicated, you really meant it. I'm sorry I got you into this, Ethan said formally, as if admitting his guilt. I'll understand if you want to get out of this. Her gaze was soft, and she knew his words weren't just an apology. They were an admission that he was losing control. Of himself, of the company, and perhaps of his future. I'm not going anywhere, Hazel said quietly, with a hint of confidence. We'll figure this out together. A small, relieved smile crossed Ethan's face, but he quickly hid it. Thank you. And turning, he headed for the door. Hazel, at the last moment, called out to him. Ethan, I think you'd be a better father than you think. He stopped at the door without turning around. Why did you decide that? You love your grandmother, you notice everything, you try to do everything right. Her voice was warm and sincere. She smiled slightly. Even if your approach sometimes seems unusual. Ethan turned, and for a moment his carefully constructed mask disappeared completely. What Hazel saw in his eyes took her breath away. Vulnerability, gratitude, and something deeper she wasn't yet ready to name. Good night, Hazel, he said quietly without his usual coldness. Good night, Ethan. After he left, Hazel stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit lake. Her thoughts were in disarray. What had started as a simple business arrangement had now become something far more complicated. And not just because of Vernon's interference. Somewhere along the way, the lines between play and real feelings became blurred. Now she was faced with an impossible choice that would change not only her life, but Ethan's life as well, possibly creating a whole new life in the process. What should I do? She whispered into the silence of the room, but no answer came except the soft lap of waves hitting the shore below. 3 days later, after returning from the cottage, Hazel found herself nervously pacing the shiny floors of the newly completed community center. It was everything she dreamed of. Bright, welcoming rooms for children's programs, a computer lab for vocational training, a commercial kitchen for cooking classes, and a spacious multi-purpose room for everything from senior yoga to community gatherings. Miss Mitchell, the contractor approached with a clipboard. We need your final signature on the sign. Hazel glanced at the design, where the name Riverside Community Center was written in bright, friendly letters. No mention of Blackwood Industries or Ethan's name, despite the fact that he had financed the entire project. "This is perfect," she confirmed, signing her name. "Thank you for getting it done so quickly." When Ethan Blackwood says, "Speed it up," people listen. The contractor chuckled. "I've never seen a project move so fast." Hazel suppressed a small smile. Ethan had truly performed a miracle to complete this center in record time, personally overseeing contractors and suppliers to ensure everything matched her vision. It was another unexpected aspect of his character that she had discovered during their agreement. Once the contractor had left, Hazel found herself lost in the quiet of the room, trying to focus on this accomplishment rather than the decision that hung over her. 2 months had passed since Vernon's ultimatum, and she was no closer to an answer. The sound of the door opening interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, looking out of place in his perfect suit in the informal setting of the center. "You're early," Hazel said, looking at her watch. "We were supposed to meet at 6. "I wanted to see everything ready," he replied, looking around with an attention that did not miss the slightest detail. "You have created something remarkable." "You and I created it," Hazel corrected. "It wouldn't have happened without you. My role was purely financial." "Don't downplay your role, Blackwood," she retorted, mimicking his exact tone at the end of his sentence. A barely noticeable smile touched his lips. "I was thorough." "You're involved," Hazel said, studying him. "Why?" Ethan looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Because it's important to you." The simplicity of his answer made Hazel freeze for a moment. Before she could respond, his phone rang with an incoming message. His face darkened as he read the message. "Vernon." Hazel guessed. Ethan nodded, clenching his jaw. "He has called an emergency council meeting for tomorrow, no doubt to press the issue of succession review." "Then our time is up," Hazel said quietly. "It looks like it." They stood in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them like an invisible wall. Finally, Hazel took a deep breath. "I was thinking about our options." "Me too," Ethan said, his face unperturbed. "But I'll let the ladies start." His attempt at humor fell flat, betraying his nervousness. Hazel pointed to the bench by the window. "Maybe we should sit down." As soon as they sat down, Hazel turned completely towards him. "I've put together a list of pros and cons. I think you'll like this approach." "Very methodical," he agreed, genuine interest flashing in his eyes. "The downsides are obvious," Hazel continued. "Having a child is a lifelong commitment. We barely know each other. Our agreement was temporary. Creating a life to fulfill a corporate succession plan is morally questionable, to say the least." Ethan nodded, his face turning serious. "All these arguments are justified. What are the advantages?" Hazel slowed her breathing before answering. "Well, your grandma will get what she wants. The company will remain in Blackwood hands." Hazel took a deep breath. "I always wanted children." "With someone you love," Ethan reminded her softly, echoing her words from months ago. "Yes," Hazel met his gaze directly. "With someone I love." Something changed in Ethan's expression. Confusion, then realization, and then a tentative hope so pure and real it made Hazel's heart clench. "Hazel," he began cautiously, "you're saying—" "I'm saying," she interrupted, the words escaping her before she could lose her resolve, "that somewhere between the pancakes at the lake and the way you noticed the change in my eyes and the way you cared about this community center because it was important to me, I started feeling things that weren't in the contract." Ethan remained motionless, his gaze never leaving her face. Hazel continued, her voice growing quieter. "The thing is, I don't know if these feelings are real or if it's just a weird situation we've created. And I definitely don't know if having a child together is the right decision, even if the feelings are real." Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then, with extreme caution, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "What is it?" Hazel asked, her heart clenching. "More contract changes, legal clauses?" Her voice grew tense. "My list," Ethan replied, handing her the paper. "Something like that." Hazel unfolded the sheet of paper and found not a list, but a letter written in Ethan's clear handwriting. "Hazel, I find myself unable to approach our situation with my usual analytical clarity. My reasoning is rendered ineffective by variables I cannot quantify. When you laugh, I forget the financial projections I have memorized. When you challenge my views, I re-examine beliefs I have held for years. When you touch my hand, even for the sake of our pretense, I lose track of time. I spent my whole life avoiding emotional connections because they seemed ineffective and unpredictable. What I didn't consider was the cost of that effectiveness. A life perfectly ordered, but not fully lived. You showed me what I was missing. Not just in theoretical terms, but in pancakes at dawn, laughter on the lake, and in the way you fight for what's important to you. I don't know if having a child together is the right decision, but I do know that I want you in my life, regardless of my grandmother's approval, regardless of the company inheritance. If Vernon took everything tomorrow, I'd consider it worth the trade-off for these few months with you. This is not a business proposal. This is me telling you, as best I can, that I have fallen in love with you. Ethan. Hazel looked up from the letter, her eyes clouded with tears. Did you write this? Yes. You, Ethan Blackwood, who communicates exclusively through contracts and spreadsheets, wrote me a love letter? It seemed an appropriate format for the content, he replied, though the formality of his words was belied by the vulnerability in his eyes. Hazel laughed through her tears. You are the strangest, yet most amazing person I have ever met. Is that good? He asked, his voice filled with genuine uncertainty. In response, Hazel leaned forward and kissed him. For a moment, he froze in surprise, but then responded with unexpected passion, his hands coming up to gently hold her face with surprising tenderness. When they finally pulled away from each other, both slightly out of breath, Ethan pressed his forehead to hers. I take it, what is this for? You didn't ask me anything, did you? Hazel joked, her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. Good question. Ethan straightened up, his expression serious again despite the warmth in his eyes. Hazel Mitchell, would you be willing to continue our relationship on a permanent basis without contractual obligations or pretense? Are you asking me to be your girlfriend for real? Yes, although that word seems inadequate for what I am proposing. Hazel smiled. Then yes, I would be happy to consider it. Joy and relief transformed his face, making him look younger and more carefree than she had ever seen him. But then reality set in again, and the moment of happiness was marred. What about the other issue? The board's ultimatum. It's more complicated, yes, Hazel admitted. I said I wanted kids someday, but having a child just to fulfill a corporate succession plan still felt wrong, even if we had real feelings for each other. Ethan nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. What if there was another way? One that would allow us to achieve our goals without violating our principles. I'm listening. We will tell the truth, he said simply. Justice? Hazel raised her eyebrows in surprise. We'll tell my grandmother that while our relationship started out as an arrangement, it's become the real deal. We'll tell the board that we'll be building a family on our own time, not theirs, and we'll accept the consequences. But the company, your legacy, is empty without integrity, Ethan added, looking at her with unexpected firmness. I have spent my life making practical decisions at the expense of honesty and emotion. I do not want our relationship or future family to start out like this. Hazel looked at him for a long moment, amazed at the transformation of the man who had once offered a surrogacy contract. Your grandmother will be disappointed about her great-grandson, she said softly, remembering Beatrice's animation when she had first begun to hope for this. Maybe, she will value honesty more than she desires an heir. Ethan took her hand. His finger began to draw gentle lines on her palm. Either way, it's the right choice. And if Vernon takes over, I'll build something new, he said with unexpected confidence, something of ours. The confidence in his voice made Hazel hold her breath. When did you become an optimist? Blackwood. About 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days ago, he answered precisely, as always, when you agreed to our fictitious relationship and started to break down all my carefully constructed barriers. Hazel laughed. This sounds quite plausible. The Blackwood Industries Board of Directors fell silent as Ethan finished his speech. 12 pairs of eyes looked at him with varying degrees of shock, while Vernon's face turned a frightening color. Let me understand, Vernon said in a slurred voice. You admit that you created a fictitious relationship to satisfy Beatrice's conditions, but now you claim that this relationship is real. And yet you refuse to produce the required heir within the prescribed time. Yes, that's true. Yes, Ethan confirmed calmly, his hand remaining firm in Hazel's under the table. This is absurd. Vernon exploded. He's obviously still manipulating the situation. In fact, a new voice interrupted him. I think he finally stopped manipulating the situation. All heads turned to see Beatrice Blackwood walking into the room with a slow but confident step, her nurse following nervously behind her. Grandmother. Ethan jumped up, his face clouded with worry. You shouldn't have come. Your doctors. My doctors can wait. Beatrice interrupted him, decisively throwing away her hand. This is more important. She looked around the room with a gaze that belied her fragile appearance. I heard everything. Ethan frowned. Did you listen? Of course I listened. Beatrice answered without any apology. Did you think I wouldn't wire this office with listening devices after Vernon's latest coup attempt? I may be old, but I'm not stupid. Despite the tension, Hazel couldn't help but smile. The apple didn't fall far from the tree when it came to the Blackwoods' paranoid habits. Beatrice walked up to the head table and stared at Vernon with such a look that he literally went blank. As for you, nephew, your transparent attempts to seize power have become tiresome. I'm just fulfilling the conditions you set yourself, Vernon tested. The conditions were testing, Beatrice remarked sharply. Not on fertility, you fool, but on character. A murmur ran through the room as Beatrice turned to Ethan and Hazel. I suspected from the start that your relationship was a conspiracy, she said. The timing was too convenient, and Ethan never showed any interest in women except in superficial business meetings. Did you know? Ethan asked, genuinely shocked. I raised you, dear boy. I know when you are reasonable and when you are sincere, Beatrice added with a soft look. Her stern gaze softened. What I didn't expect was to see you truly fall in love for the first time in your life. Hazel felt the color creep into her cheeks, and Beatrice's knowing gaze shifted to her. And you, my dear, have done what I thought was impossible. You have taught my grandson that some things cannot be controlled, planned, or contracted. I didn't do it alone, Hazel said quietly. He was always capable of more than he believed. Beatrice nodded, looking at them both with satisfaction before turning back to the council members. As for the succession issue, I am changing the terms. Ethan will retain control of Blackwood Industries without any additional requirements for heirs or time limits. You can't do that, Vernon protested. I can do anything, Beatrice interrupted coldly. I still hold the controlling interest, as you well know. She continued. Moreover, I am creating a new department within Blackwood Industries, the Department of Community Development, which will be headed by Hazel Mitchell, should she decide to accept the position. Hazel's mouth dropped open in surprise. Mrs. Blackwood, you have proven your worth, not just to my grandson but to this company, Beatrice said firmly. The Riverside Community Center is just the beginning of what you could do with the right support. This is very unusual, one council member noted. Innovation often is like that, Beatrice replied. And evolution is necessary for survival. She turned back to Ethan and Hazel. As for the great-grandchildren, I certainly welcome them. But I confess that it is quite enough for me to watch you build something important together, no matter what form it takes. The meeting ended shortly afterward with Vernon leaving the room in anger, and the remaining council members voting to approve Beatrice's proposed changes. As they started to leave, Beatrice gestured for Ethan and Hazel to stay. Once they were alone, the formidable matriarchy allowed herself to look truly tired for the first time. Well, she said with a small smile, that was more excitement than my doctors would have approved. You need to rest, Ethan reminded him gently. I will rest when I die, which will be very soon, Beatrice replied, not hiding her frankness. In the meantime, I have something for both of you. From her handbag, she took out a small, tattered velvet box. Ethan, your grandfather gave me this for our 5th wedding anniversary. I think it's time for it to find a new home. Ethan took the box carefully and opened it to reveal a stunning vintage ring, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds in an intricate platinum setting. Grandma, this is your favorite decoration, he said quietly. That's why it should go to the one you love, Beatrice replied. When you're ready, of course. No contracts, no deadlines. Hazel felt tears well up in her eyes at the gesture and what it meant. Thank you, Ethan said, his voice full of emotion. For everything. Don't thank me yet, Beatrice chuckled. I've instructed my doctors to try an experimental treatment. I may be interfering for years to come. A year has passed. Are you absolutely sure about this? Ethan asked, his usually calm face filled with worry as he paced nervously down the hall. The statistical probability of success the first time is that. If you quote adoption statistics to me again, I'm going to throw something at you, Hazel warned, though her smile softened the words. Yes, I'm sure. We are. Now sit down before you wipe the floor. Ethan sat up, his knees still trembling nervously with excitement. I've rearranged my entire schedule for next year. The renovation of the children's room is complete. I researched every pediatrician within a 30-mile radius and compiled a list of their qualifications in a table. Of course, Hazel said with a smile, taking his hand. That's why you'll be an amazing father. Miss Mitchell, Mr. Blackwood. The social worker appeared at the door with a smile. She is ready to meet you. They followed her down a brightly colored hallway into a playroom, where a dark-haired girl of about 4 sat quietly, carefully sorting blocks by color. She looked up as they entered, her serious gaze meeting theirs appraisingly. Maya, the social worker said softly, these are the people I told you about. Miss Mitchell and Mr. Blackwood. Hello, Maya, Hazel said, crouching down to the child's level. You're building a beautiful tower. Maya looked them over carefully and then handed Ethan a red block. This needs to be put on top, she said seriously. To Hazel's delight, Ethan immediately sat down next to her and, taking the block, asked with the same serious expression on his face. Thank you. Is this the right place? Maya assessed his actions and nodded. You did it right. She turned to Hazel. Can you make it green? With pleasure, Hazel replied, taking the green block. Slowly, Maya began to open up, explaining her color system with such precision that Ethan's eyes lit up with recognition. When she handed him a jumbled pile of blocks and said, these need to be categorized, his face broke into a genuine smile. Later, as they prepared to leave, promising to return the next day, Maya tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Will you help me finish the categories tomorrow? She asked, her voice quiet but determined. Ethan sat down again, meeting her gaze with soft sincerity. I promise, and I always keep my promises. They rode in the car in silence, digesting the meeting. It's perfect, Hazel said finally, tears glistening in her eyes. It sorts by color and size. I agree, Ethan replied, his voice unusually thick, and she has incredible attention to detail. Hazel laughed, wiping away her tears. Of course that's what you noticed. Not her pretty eyes or her sweet smile. I noticed that too, Ethan admitted. But did you see how she solved the problem when the tower started to collapse? Her spatial thinking is at an adult level for her age. We're really doing this, Hazel said, surprised. Starting a family? Not like we discussed before, Ethan admitted, holding out his hand. Better. Much better, Hazel confirmed, squeezing his fingers. Much better. Ethan nodded, his eyes soft with an emotion no chart could express. I've calculated every variable in my life except you, Hazel Mitchell. You were the unpredictable factor that changed all my equations. Is this your way of saying you love me? Hazel teased. No, it's like this, he replied, pulling her towards him for a kiss that promised everything no contract ever could. Beatrice Blackwood lived to see Maya officially become a Blackwood. She watched a serious little girl learn to play chess and heard stories of empire building. She witnessed her grandson transform from an isolated efficiency expert into a devoted husband and father. Riverside Community Center has thrived under Hazel's leadership, expanding into 3 new locations across the city, while Ethan revolutionized Blackwood Industries with a focus on social impact and ethical business practices. Vernon eventually founded his own company, which collapsed after just 2 years. Maya grew up in a family where her father sorted her rock collections into perfect tables, and her mother taught her that the most beautiful things in life are the ones that can't be planned. 2 years later, the family was joined by 2 twin brothers who drove Ethan crazy with their carefree attitude towards his organizational systems. And on quiet evenings, after the children had fallen asleep, Hazel would often find Ethan in his office, not working, just looking at the family photographs with such amazement, as if he couldn't believe that his carefully controlled life had suddenly given way to something so unpredictably beautiful. "Any regrets?" she asked, hugging him. Ethan pulled her close, remembering the contract that had started it all, that cold, calculated beginning that had led to the warmest, truest love he had ever known. "Not a single one," he answered, and he said this with all his once frozen heart.